Hi there, Jessy, CHAHAL and NADIAH ABDUL joining you once again. We're back taking you through the 47th ASEAN Summit and related meetings. We've spoken to experts, analysts, as well as authors who have weighed in to what this summit means, not just for the region, but in terms of geopolitics globally as well. Well, we're further going to dive deep into these conversations. For the next hour, we have more guests joining us to unpack and unwrap some of the salient discussion points and key focus areas of the summit. Of course, big news today was President Donald Trump touched down on Kuala Lumpur soil, and that has been, I think it's gone viral as well with the little dance that he did.
Yes.
Nonetheless, in this segment, we want to focus on Trump's presence at ASEAN 2025. The big question is it a deal or is it a disruption for regional unity? We want to explore how his presence and his policies could shape the dynamics of regional cooperation and unity for ASEAN.
And that's why from morning we've been seeing dignitaries landing in Kuala Lumpur. We've got the customary ASEAN handshake, the right over left, signifying not only solidarity but this commitment towards integration and sustainability. So joining us today, Jessy, this afternoon is none other than Ambassador Brian FEETERS, retired President and CEO of the US-ASEAN Business Council. He's no stranger to the studios. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Go ahead.
A big day as we celebrate the bilateral relationships between both nations, Malaysia and the US, but also as a bloc looking outward regionally. What would you say from the onset has been some of your observations in terms of during your role as ambassador and now as president of the US ASEAN Business Council, that balance between US bilateral relations but also the multilateral relations with ASEAN?
Yeah, good question. I do have a great fondness for Malaysia. I served here as ambassador and I also served here before, so total of 5 years. Great appreciation. So maybe starting with Malaysia, US, I think the ASEAN summit, the degree of international participation, even leaving aside President Trump, there's a tremendous amount of international participation, world leaders. I was watching them all get out of the car this morning. So Malaysia, through Prime Minister Anwar's chairmanship of this meeting, has clearly put itself on the map. And then President Trump, I mean, I think all of us in the business community, I'm no longer on the inside as it were, we were all expecting him to come, but nobody was sure until Air Force One actually landed, right? I think there was a lot of,
Absolutely.
So I think that adds significance to, the economic conversation and the geopolitical conversation. I think people want the US and Malaysia to have very strong relations. This is Americans, as much as I can generalize, and the US to have strong relations with ASEAN. So maybe President Trump coming here signals that. We'll have to see, it's just beginning. So we'll have to see what the outcomes are of his discussions.
And we see on screen right now, of course, both leaders meeting not only the dignitaries, but also it was a very warm welcome from the children of Malaysia as well. I think that there have been quite a lot being shared on social media, and of course you're probably going to see his little jig that's going to be shown again. But when we're talking about ASEAN, the theme has always been on inclusivity and sustainability, and this focus, this laser focus almost on how are we going to enhance regional integration. So what are some of your thoughts? How is intra-ASEAN regional integration and coordination going to look like, knowing full well that there is quite a lot of uncertainties, not only in terms of geopolitics, but of course countries?
There's been a lot of discussions at the meetings I've been in the last few days about that issue. How can ASEAN strengthen itself internally? And I think intra-ASEAN trade is something like 23% of the total, and people think it should be a lot more. It's an interesting conversation because US companies are trying to do more. Everybody's trying to do more in ASEAN. And we both have something in common in the sense that it sounds a little bit wonkish, but there are non-tariff measures, basically like rules that make it difficult to do business. And that's standing in the way of more intra-ASEAN trade and also standing in the way of more US-ASEAN trade and investment. I'd be glad to give you examples, but I don't want to get too, wonkish on it.
But, I mean, I think we'd like to know what would then be one of the ways to break some of these barriers. You did say non-tariff measures, so perhaps one of them.
I'll give you one example. I just came from we did an Indonesia business mission where we took 35 companies to see Indonesian senior leaders. And one of the issues that kept coming up was import restrictions. So if you're a business working in Indonesia, and let's say you want to bring in some testing equipment because you have to do something in your factory. Well, it's not going to be a simple, order it and get it delivered. You have to ask for a permit, and then it's like a 3-level process, and you have to get a custom. So it's just friction, and I think that also impacts intra-ASEAN as well as it does US-ASEAN.
Well, going towards what ASEAN has to offer at this particular summit as well, there has been a lot of backdoor discussions in terms of the region's prominence, being able to supply or to tap into the global supply chain. And at the same time, ASEAN is seen as a trustworthy trading partner that will help to ensure that provision and supply. In your view, what is perhaps ASEAN's most under-leveraged strength or undervalued strength? And how does the US view what ASEAN can really offer?
I think ASEAN has a lot of strengths that, maybe they're not undervalued as much as under-recognized. So our organization cooperates with the East-West Center and the ICS Center in Singapore every 2 years, and we do a study called America Matters to ASEAN, and it matters to ASEAN and the reverse. And one of the facts that comes out of that is 45% of all the semiconductor chips that the U.S. imports for cars and medical equipment and everything, 45% comes from ASEAN. So ASEAN is really already at the supply chain. Somebody gave an anecdote yesterday from, it was an Indonesian government official saying that during the COVID crisis, some of the car plants in Detroit had to shut down because of a particular semiconductor that didn't come from Malaysia. So I guess my point is ASEAN and Malaysia in particular are already vital parts of the supply chain. Maybe people just don't realize it.
And I think what remains to be seen is how this, I guess, growing space can be even more dynamic in future. You mentioned semiconductors. I think now in the last few days we've been also talking about health, tech and AI. We've been talking about transitioning some of the lower tech commodities within the supply chain into a higher end. But at the same time, what we're seeing in ASEAN, and we were discussing earlier today, was how do we level that playing field, understanding that there are nations within ASEAN that are perhaps not as at par with the rest. And it's good to bring them up. So
to promote that inclusive
exactly.
growth.
So in your thoughts, when we're talking about how do we better protect the ASEAN economies from external shocks, what are some of the things that we have to focus on?
I think it's already a very mutually beneficial. I can, most informed basis talk about US-ASEAN. So the US companies in our organization that are doing business with ASEAN have been sending a message this year. There's all this uncertainty. We don't know where the trade rules are going to come out, but we offer certainty and continuity. And in the context of this business mission, like in Indonesia, and then in some meetings in Singapore last week, it's the companies are telling local government leaders about the things that they're willing to do in addition. So in our own way, we're not the full answer, but in our own way, U.S. companies are providing investment, but not only investment, workforce development, corporate social responsibility, help in areas of like maternal and child health. They're doing a lot of things that help across the board, not just the bottom line profit.
Earlier this week, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim was called the peace whisperer and the trade whisperer. Where do you see Malaysia stand, or how can Malaysia really play that role to the T in terms of, as a key ASEAN member, but being a gateway for deeper US-Asia-ASEAN conversations?
I think I don't know the details of the Thailand-Cambodia peace agreement. I think it just came out. But I think it's hugely significant, the fact that it happened under Prime Minister Anwar's sponsorship, if you will. I hadn't heard the term peace whisperer, but it sounds apt. I think the fact that it happened here under the gaze of the whole world, calls attention to it and probably creates some kind of pressure for it to be lived up to. Right? It would be very difficult to turn around tomorrow and say, oh, I didn't really mean that agreement. So I think more generally, the fact of this high-profile summit in ASEAN with not only the ASEAN leaders, which are now 11, right? Delighted to see East Timor joining. Not only the 11 ASEAN leaders, but all of the world leaders. I think it's, I've been working on and off in ASEAN since 1994, but I've never seen anything quite this maybe world high-profile before. So congratulations to Malaysia.
Right. I just wanted to expound on that point a little bit. Like, you've seen this happen throughout the years. What has really escalated Malaysia to be able to, as chair, pull this off, for lack of a better description?
I mean, Prime Minister Anwar is, he's a prime minister who was preparing the job for about 30 years before he got it, right? So this is a person who has probably an unparalleled international network.
Right.
I know in the U.S. case, virtually every prominent politician, or for that matter, entertainer, I think Anwar has a link to him, and that probably, sorry, I should say Prime Minister Anwar. He probably has that network worldwide. So it might be that, that I don't think too many leaders would be able to rival that.
And I think when we're talking about ASEAN being a vibrant place, we were talking about the 680 million citizens of ASEAN and where we want to move ahead. Earlier we were talking about digital transformation. Now we were just talking about the different companies that are involved in your consortium when you're talking about moving and catapulting digital infrastructure. Now for sure, when we're talking about ASEAN digital growth and digital infrastructure, how do we then perhaps strengthen ASEAN's economic resilience, knowing that we've got a young demography here and our internet as well as digital penetration is actually quite high? What are some of the things that we should be leveraging on?
Just picking up on the figure used, 680 million, our U.S. mission to ASEAN, located in Jakarta, but they cover all of ASEAN. They put out kind of a brochure the other day that caught my attention because it says, how do our billion people work together, right? Because if you take roughly 700 million and 350 million, it's a billion. So I thought that was a billion people. And on the digital side, I mean, if you would go back to, say, January of 2025, before we really knew that it was going to be all about tariffs, US-ASEAN Business Council was ready to tell a story, and we still are, which basically said, look at ASEAN, it's the points you made. You have a young population, they're digitally savvy, they're picking up on AI faster than any other part of the world, according to a study that Google released yesterday. So this is kind of the digital, in a sense, one of the digital capitals of the world. There's a digital economic framework agreement that's going to even make it more liberal and, more, maybe not more liberal, but more uniform across ASEAN, and make it easy for SMEs to do more digital business. So I think, every part of the world, people need to learn more about AI and how to apply AI. But my sense from my colleagues who are in the business is ASEAN is really a leading place for AI development.
We look at the theme this year, inclusivity and sustainability, and of course that question is coming up for you in terms of sustainable finance and green investment, not just for the region but particularly for each state. How would you, or what would be the steps forward to ensure that that is resilient and that there is a good playing ground for businesses of that nature to happen?
So I have to say, this is my personal view, but in Southeast Asia, in my working experience in Southeast Asia under President Biden, there was a big emphasis on renewable energy. How can the U.S. be involved? That's not the case now. Right now they have this, energy dominance, more shifting back to fossil fuels or whatever. I mean, that's not, that you could make arguments both ways. But my point in saying that is, I think it's really good that ASEAN and the ASEAN countries are keeping their focus on more renewable energy, decarbonizing, connecting the power grid, all the things that I think most people in the world realize have to be happen. We have some companies in US-ASEAN Business Council that can play a role. We have GE, which built a lot of the power in ASEAN, and they can, if the power is going to be shifted to more green, GE can help with that. And we have some other companies that are, can be part of this. So I consider it a priority to stay in this conversation.
And I think we saw this in the last few months, especially in the earlier ASEAN senior officials meeting, where there was quite a big focus on energy transition, having the business coming into play to discuss how we can actually move the dial for ASEAN. For example, I know we've got the ASEAN Taxonomies version 3 that came out in December 2024, because you said, how do we harmonize the taxonomy? How do we harmonize some of the decisions and definitions on where we're trying to head? What are your sense on that? Is that moving in the direction that we want?
I think ASEAN is a very admirable institution, but it's an institution that moves slowly, right? I mean, that's no secret. Yesterday, I was at one of the opening meetings where some of the prominent Malaysians were on stage, and somebody said, in addition to the digital economic framework, why don't we have, I forget the acronym they use, but why don't we have an environmental, a green environmental framework agreement for all of ASEAN? So I think there has to be some kind of encapsulated bumper sticker motto, and then you try to work on it.
bumper sticker motto. And I think we have been talking about this, how there are many declarations that are made in regional and international platforms that then, you know, the proof of the pudding is how fast and how far you're going to be able to make that really work on ground, for businesses to be able to feel that, for the average ASEAN citizen to be able to feel that. And you know, Jesse and I were talking about the fact that ASEAN is also a vibrant space for MSMEs or you know, SMEs. Do you foresee that there's going to be more spaces for them in this integration of a framework that we're trying to reach?
I've been at seminars over the last few days where people, you know, big tech companies have been talking in particular about what they're doing in the small and medium enterprise space. So I think there's a lot of education and capacity building, particularly aimed at SMEs. I think that's going to be a growth area.
Right, okay, I think we do have a moment here to take you to a bit of a clip that we have prepared, and we will, of course, bring that over to you shortly. We're getting those cues as they come in. Happening at the Kuala Lumpur Convention Centre right now, of course, the continuation of the summit. We also believe that President Trump and Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim are about to meet the press as well, to give them a little bit more of an insight as to what's going on. Just to, you know, off the cuff, hearing that Trump will be here in KL and being part of the ASEAN summit. This is his first stop, and then he's off to Japan and South Korea as well. What were some of your initial thoughts as to where the US is trying to place itself in this part of the world?
I mean, I'm in a business organization, and we've been watching the trade situation, you know, kind of nonstop certainly since April and even before that. So to me, the most interesting thing is there's a news report that President Trump signed a trade agreement with Malaysia, and also a critical minerals agreement with Thailand, and also a trade agreement with Cambodia. So I'm just depending on those news headlines, but that all of those will be particularly significant because, again, going back to the business point of view, they want as much certainty as they can. So if somebody's saying like, well, there's an agreement, but we don't know what's going to be in it, that's much more difficult to deal with than an agreement that's signed and agreed on, and then you can begin implementing it. So I'll be watching very closely to see what exactly happened between US and Malaysia, US Cambodia, US Thailand.
So as we see on screen were the signing and handover ceremony this morning, and of course we also saw the accession of Timor-Leste as the 11th member of ASEAN. So this was this morning.
That's right. This is at the second protocol to amend the ATIGA, the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement. And as you've pointed out, Nadia, also many salient points, and Timor-Leste's accession as the 11th member state of ASEAN. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a particular fondness for East Timor. I've been there 5 or 6 times. When I served in Indonesia, it was initially still a part of Indonesia in the early days. So I went there a few times under that regime. I think East Timor is a success story in the sense of, you know, it went through a difficult colonial period, a difficult independence period, conflict with Indonesia. All that is in the past. East Timor and Indonesia have excellent relations. So now I think it's you know, maybe beyond time for East Timor to be part of ASEAN. I think it's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for being in here, Ambassador, and giving us your perspective as well. I believe that after this, you will be making your way to the convention center.
Right. We're trying to meet with some of the U.S. officials who are not President Trump himself, but some people that are traveling with him.
Yes.
We were just
bring him to the studio.
That's right. Yeah.
So we did try to get in touch with Trump's administration for an interview, but I think he's hard pressed for time as well.
That's what I understand.
Thank you for coming in on behalf.
Thank you both.
Thank you
so much. Dan jumpa lagi.
Yes, that's right.
Sampai jumpa. Yeah, okay.
All right. Over the past few days, of course, I've been stationed at Kuala Lumpur Convention Centre. We're trying to grab any delegates or VIPs, as we refer to them, and have a little bit of conversation. Here's a clip, a quick insight into what Malaysia's ambassador to Timor-Leste had shared with us. And this happened just before Timor-Leste ascended to ASEAN. Hi, I'm seated here with a very special individual, someone who's done a lot of work in building relations between Malaysia and Timor, the ambassador of Malaysia to the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste. Your Excellency, welcome, and thank you for making that time.
Yes, thank you very much, Jessy, for having me over. They are much nearer to the finish line of 26 October, when they officially exceed as a full member of ASEAN. And yeah, all the important people from Timor-Leste are on the ground.
And of course, it is a very busy time for you as well, being the go-to person between both nations to, of course, promote a better understanding and a better relationship in terms of economy and trade and beyond. Your Excellency, you've seen Timor-Leste's growth up close, from introducing change to expanding ties with Malaysia as well as ASEAN. What has stood out most for you about the country's readiness and resilience as it moves really close within days towards its membership?
The one thing that has got me excited is when I arrived 2.5 years ago in Delhi, people were asking me about what is ASEAN all about? Why should we join ASEAN? What is Timor-Leste going to derive out of ASEAN membership? And fast forward now, 2.5 years later, they're like, oh, thank you, we are almost there. We are very optimistic about seeing improved economic performance of Timor-Leste, improvements in human resource development. So these are the kind of statements that I'm hearing, and the government has managed to rally the entire population of Timor-Leste, be it in the urban ones as well as the rural ones. So they've got ASEAN. The flavor of the year has been ASEAN. And even as we speak here, arrangements are being made to celebrate this momentous occasion on the 26th of October, not only in Dili, but in every district, in every of the 13 districts in Timor-Leste.
I like what you said. The flavor of the year has been ASEAN. Of course, we're in the thick of the ASEAN summit right now, expecting world leaders as well to, or rather more world leaders to touch down in the next coming days. We're already seeing new bridges being built, from direct flights to business corporations, and of course more Malaysian presence on the ground in Dili. From your experience as well, what kind of partnerships are really helping Timor-Leste connect faster with Malaysia and ASEAN and beyond?
Yeah, the word connect is very important. Connectivity has been Timor-Leste's perennial problem all these years. Since last June, we've got direct flights from Kuala Lumpur twice weekly, and going further now, beginning 5th November, it will be thrice weekly. The way I look at it, connectivity seems to have been the one missing integral part which we have managed to contribute something now. Now we need to look into telecommunications. We need to get our, right after Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim's visit to Dili, we've managed to get our telco players talking. And they've moved very fast, and I think there will be some very positive development. This is to encourage more people-to-people contact, especially at the business level. I mean, nowadays people want to travel somewhere, they look, do we have roaming there? So those kind of questions.
Right.
So I think these are things which are being addressed, and we look forward to that. Aside from that, internet connectivity, that's another area which has been not been seeing much progress previously, but in the last one year, there has been some movement to improve their high-speed internet availability. I think that there lies another opportunity for the Malaysian private sector if there's something that we want to look at. So we've got flights, we've got internet. Now we need to look at how to tap into the most low-hanging fruit for Timor-Leste, which is the tourism sector. Because you need to get for the tourism sector to grow, you need to make sure you have good hospitality, you've got a good international brand hotels. I think that is another area. If they are interested, Malaysian players, it's something that we can definitely assist them to explore in Timor-Leste.
So you're also underscoring the fact that there's a plentiful business opportunities for crossover for Malaysian brands as well as international brands into Dili and Timor-Leste. Just to get a little under your skin, this has happened, or this feat has happened under your appointment to the country. What do you feel, or how do you feel about this win? This, of course, is a big feather in your cap.
Nah, it's just happening at the right time, I'm just at the right time, at the right place. A lot of this work has begun even before I assumed office in Dili. Credit for ASEAN membership, Timor-Leste side goes back even to President Ramos Horta, who first mooted this idea in 2011. And now we fast forward to 2025, we're almost there. The current 9th constitutional government of Timor-Leste has, needs to be credited for taking a very serious and committed, you can say, workload. And they know that they know about the ASEAN workload. Prime Minister Shanana often says that now we need to have an entire setup just to take care of ASEAN, and they're doing it. While they talk about it, the thing is they've been doing it in the last 2 years. They've got the Ministry of Economy and all the other ministries who are contributing to the 3 pillars of ASEAN, getting them all together to actually meet the roadmap, meet the milestones in the roadmap to accession. It's been phenomenal, the kind of work that has gone into this kind of things. And so I think lots have been achieved going forward past 26 October, lots to look forward to.
That's right, and as you say that very quickly, a lot to unpack. We look at ASEAN, and close to 40% of ASEAN is made up of youth, those 35 and below. What does this signify as well for the spirit of the people in Timor-Leste? They are young, they are optimistic, they are deeply proud of their culture as well. How do you see that energy infusing within ASEAN? I
think it's going to be a welcome addition for ASEAN to have such a youthful population in its youngest member country. The government of Timor-Leste now looks set to look into the next most pressing issue, which is unemployment. We need to get the youth employed. We need to get industries up and running. We need to get investors to come to Timor-Leste and get their wares out there into the world market.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your time, and of course all the very best and congratulations for what is up ahead in perhaps the next 48, 72 hours.
Thank you, Jessie.
Well, that's all the time we have. It's back to you in the studio.